Well, I said this is the staff. So.
Okay, Kent, you ready?
Hi, how are you?
Okay. Okay, we'd like to call this meeting to order for a Board of Trustees public hearing appropriation ordinance meeting. Time is 6:36.
Yeah, you should, yeah.
Let me take the roll call, please.
Sure. Trustee McGreal is absent. Trustee Dalzell.
Here.
Trustee Pierce.
Here.
Trustee Zelinski.
Here.
Trustee Juarez.
Here.
Trustee McLaughlin.
Here.
Mayor Ryan.
Here. So the purpose of this evening's meeting, to start with, is to discuss our appropriation ordinance. So obviously this will be in the hands of our finance director, Kent Olivan.
Thank you, Mayor. Together a small
This one.
Okay, so this is the public hearing. Our goals are we need to understand the budget process. We want to look at the timetable a little bit. The trends affecting the budget, and that's pretty much going to be about healthcare trends. Some budget decisions that were made, and so the overview. But as it states, budgets allow the governments to transparently discuss, prioritize, and decide upon the allocation of public resources. The village is funded with fees for services, with property tax, with other taxes, and I have no idea what this is, so we'll just hit snooze and hope it goes away. These are public resources. Some of them are for services provided for individuals, but because they're public resources, they belong to the residents of the village of Alsip, and this is a transparent way to discuss them and to look at them. In Illinois, governments can implement a budget ordinance or an appropriation ordinance. The village has traditionally used an appropriation ordinance. And because of that, it needs to pass it by the end of July. It always passes it about this time. We had talked about moving it to a budget ordinance, which I feel is a better document. Last year that didn't happen because we ended up, finance ended up with almost no staff at all. We had multiple FMLA, so we had people missing all at once. This year, it didn't happen. Well, actually, we'll talk about. I think we'll talk about that in a minute. But we're passing it at the same time as we've passed it historically, right at the end of July. And this year, Alsip's doing something slightly different. It's putting a budget in with the appropriation ordinance. So the appropriation is typically here been the same as the budgeted amount. That's not a good idea when it comes to how the appropriation ordinance is defined in the state statutes. It really should be a much higher number. But if you put a very high number out there, it may mislead departments to think that that's the amount they're allowed to spend, and they could start spending. For that reason, we've put a budget line item in that same appropriation ordinance so they know that's the amount that they should be following. That's different this year. So the budget process began very late in 2016 when I sent a timetable and budget worksheets to department heads. I also sent timetables to the village board at that time. January was and early February was a busy time. I met with all department heads except building. He was retiring. I met with all of them. I think there wasn't a single one I didn't meet at least 4 hours with. Part of that had to do with the fact that as part of this process, we wanted to do more than just 1 year budget. We did 5 years afterwards. This it's not being passed that way, but it's a method so people see what capital items are coming down in the future. That takes a lot to set up in its initial year. And actually a lot to do even in subsequent years. In February, budget hearings were held. All of the larger departments had presentations. So we had police, fire, I believe we had building. We definitely had village properties. We had heritage. Trying to think of it. Public works, water. All of them spoke before the last one. We were moving right along, actually. And the reason we were doing is we actually wanted to move to a budget ordinance which must be passed by 4:30. Now, we had tried to refinance some bonds. I say refinance. It's refunding and advance refunding of bonds in late summer, early fall, but that did not get done due to some staffing issues. And so that period, as soon as the election happened, the municipal bond market dramatically turned for the worse. The other thing that happened at that time around that time is the Fed finally started to increase the rates, and so there was no more money. It opened up again right as we were in the middle of the budget process. So we had conversations with the previous board about, do we want to move to a budget ordinance and get it done by 4:30, or do we want to chase the money and go back to an appropriation ordinance, even if it meant passing it like we normally do right at the end of July? That board unanimously said, we need the savings of these bonds. One saves money and one doesn't. So that's how we got to where we are here. The draft FY18 budget was posted at the clerk's office a month ago. The first draft. Today right now is the budget hearing, and it says 7:30. I apologize. That should say 7 o'clock. Is a special board meeting to pass the ordinance. It was 7:30 last year. I didn't change that. So the village board, I guess technically it's all the village board, but the budget hearings have, since the new board has come into being, has been committees of the whole and of the finance committee. That group, as well as the previous village board who had gone through most of the budget hearings, had some really big things, and almost all of them are in healthcare. Healthcare has really been what's really out of proportion to everything else. In fiscal year 17, the village saw a 25.3% increases in its health insurance costs. Now, health insurance costs, I should have actually said health premiums. It's not the claims, but the premiums saw a 25.3% increase. An additional 13% is in this budget. Part of that has to do with, in order to capture some savings, in order to capture the ability to move some people to high deductible health care plans with an HSA, we needed to move from a fiscal year to a calendar year. Unfortunately, in FY17, and we discussed this at the last budget hearing, that meant that we ended up with two increases that year. We ended up at the fiscal year, which was a shortened 8 months, and then at the beginning of the year, we got a second increase this fiscal year because we moved to calendar year. So it was a double whammy. The village also absorbed more than its regular 85% in order to incentivize employees to take more control over their own health, thus increasing the employee health and reducing medical payouts over the long term. As we discussed, the village has an HCA, which is a very generous plan. It's so generous that a good portion of people make deductibles in the spring, and after that, there's very little cost to the employees. So trying to get them to go to doctors, unless something's wrong with them, they are willing to go to the emergency room if something goes wrong. They have a tendency not to go to family doctors, get checkups, etc. So the village, the last board wanted to move, some evidence was presented that to reduce the payouts Incentivizing people to show up to wellness, get their blood drawn, talk to a nurse, etc. is a good idea. And to move to to incentivize people to move to a high deductible plan with that HSA was also a good idea. The more people take control over their own health care costs and have a skin in the game, the lower the overall costs and the more healthy the employees become. So that's a temporary thing that it broke the 85%, but it became significant. Drug costs, and this is a nationwide thing. This has nothing to do with the village of Alsip, but drug costs have been growing astronomically as they've been coming out with better and better drugs. Some of these new ones are very expensive. This is what we hear about when we talk about healthcare costs in this country. And then we're self-insured up to $70,000 per claim, and we've been getting a lot of them in the past few years, and that means an increase in premiums. So that's all on the premium side. What else are we seeing? That we give retirement health care to a good portion of our retirees, and that's mainly based on age and how long they've been there. But after 20 years of service, it's likely that they're going to get retirement health care benefits in retirement of some form or another, and when they turn 65, that will increase to the village picking up 90% of those costs. Those are rather large. We've talked about those in many meetings. It's sort of swallowing the budget. And because of that, the village board has had to put more and more money towards that. It increased by $310,000 last fiscal year. It's going to increase by over $1.25 more million. That's huge. It's absolutely huge as a portion of our budget. And while it's expected that workers' comp and medical claims payouts combine. Actually, you know what I should have said? That's all general fund. There's a little bit also coming out of road and bridge and water fund. And workers' comp and medical claim payouts for the next year are essentially flat. It's going up less than 1%. However, in prior years we've talked about here, there was a huge increase. So it's $707,000 or 24% more than it was just 3 years ago. So again, that's also medical claims. Didn't hit us so much this year. Combined, these things are overwhelming the budget, just overwhelming it. The revenues are not keeping up anywhere near like that. So the village board and its staff submitted a budget that was very lean with capital expenditures, doesn't have any layoffs. Capital is being delayed, and it has been for a number of years in many areas. The village board very carefully said this year what could cause health and safety issues, and went back and asked each department head to produce that, analyzed it, and made further cuts from what department heads said. Some of those in vehicles. An ambulance was cut, a police squad car was cut, a Ford F-150, a backhoe. It's a $160,000 item. These were all some of the items that were cut. A lot of asphalt was cut. Over $300,000 of asphalt on village properties was cut. And requested positions in police and fire were not funded. So that covers what we're doing and why we're doing it.
I got some comments about the bottom line of the budget as well. As you know, I came and got a final copy of the Finance Department budget.
Yes.
After looking at some of the numbers between the FY16 actuals and the budgeted amount final for FY18, the Finance Department budget went up by over 22%. And within those items, I mean, every single line item went up in your department, with the exception of office supplies, which was about $19, but everything else went up anywhere from 5 to 35% in each individual line item. And I think some of it stems from the FY17 amended budget under consulting. You have $133,000 there from previously $3,000. And the year before that was like 3,500 as well.
Yeah, but
But once you take that out, if that was a mistake, if you add all the other stuff together, I mean, even you said at one point that every year everything's supposed to go up only about 1.5%. And, I mean, I can go line by line. I have every single line item increased by how much it was increased. But a couple of things that stand out, obviously, are the new staff accountant, which I think in the last board meeting, we went over the police administrator and the fire department part-time person, and it was sort of skipped over your staff, your new staff accountant. I don't think anybody even questioned it until later. But other than that, I had asked you before what a contingent expense was, and I guess mildly put, it was a miscellaneous expense.
yeah.
Okay. Under, under the 2016, it's about $6,000, and you have it budgeted for 18 for another 6,000, which is right in line.
I
But
have 4,000.
Huh?
Next column over, 4,000.
okay, 4,000. But if you go all the way to the bottom, under miscellaneous, there's another 14,000.
That's under equipment computers.
So that 14,000 is
That's part
strictly
of-
for computers.
Computer,
Okay, so that's different item. Okay.
different item.
Also, under your intern, you have your intern as being paid $82.40. I wasn't aware you had an intern. Is that correct?
I do have an intern. I didn't have one from late spring until midsummer.
But you have another one at this point?
I have an intern, yes.
Okay.
Well,
I think we discussed that with this village board.
well, you've got a summer helper is what you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a permanent position out there.
Okay, but he has Karen Bonneman as an accountant, Heather as,
Heather is a part-time employee who manages both payroll and accounts payable.
okay.
Right.
And then an intern you said you have, a summer
We do have
helper?
a summer intern. In the past, we've used that. Actually, the position has been, I can't say that it's ever been full year, but it is more than a summer intern.
Okay. So you could have up to 4 people helping you at, or including yourself at any given time?
An intern is usually someone with a bit of college. They're not out of college. They're helpful, but they're not an accountant.
Okay. But going back to that 133,000, if you go through all of the,
That was a budget amount. There was 7,700 spent that year.
okay. If you subtract that 133,000 out and you add all the differences in all the other line items, it's really ironic that it comes out to just about $133,000. It's about $1,000 off. So I was wondering if that was like a play on numbers, and why would your department be getting over a 22% increase when everybody else is trying to cut back?
Most of what you see there are either their accounting, their actuarial, and I can go into both of those, or their salaries. I mean, that's basically where we're at. We've budgeted for a number of years. We do the training for the HTE system, and for the last few years, we have not been able to get to it, so it's been budgeted every year, but it hasn't been spent. We've started to do some of that training this year, which is the first time, but it's been budgeted every year for that training. It's just this is the first year we're getting to it. The accounting rules have been changing fairly large in the past few years, and that is affecting our audit costs, and the actuarial rules as part of that are changing as well, and that's affecting our actuarial costs. So the actuarial costs for police and fire pension was brought before here, and we discussed that a month or so ago, because the village picks up half of that cost. The OPEB costs in the next year, it was every 3 years, and now it's going to be every 2 years starting with next year. But next year is a very big one because not only is it going to move, it's that year that's every 2, But it's also when the new GASB 74 and 75 are coming out, which do the same thing to OPEB that happened to the pensioners. It's redefining what debt is. It's creating some variance tables, but beyond where the pension stuff is, it's also doing variance on healthcare cost increase. What happens if healthcare cost increases is 1% less than expected? What if it's 1% greater than expected? It's a lot more work. So there's a new one that's only that'll be next year and hopefully not again for another 3 years. So those are.
But wouldn't that come out of everybody's budget, not just yours?
No, it comes out of finance.
Okay.
Out of finance's budget for OPEB. Same with the consulting. You could argue that the consulting should be in every department that uses it, but it's coming out of finance for the consulting for the HDE. A lot of it's salaries, and basically, most of it. There's a server replacement for $15,000 this year that wasn't there before, and most of it really has to do with salary increases. But it's mainly the staff accountant. There's a $50,000 staff accountant, which was in the budget 2 years ago. It was 58, and we talked. You're right. It wasn't mentioned much in the last one, but I did mention that the mayor and I had cut that from 58,000 down to the same 50. It was previously in the budget, so it was cut to 58,000. So it was mentioned. It wasn't a huge conversation because that's not where the conversation, where anyone asked for the conversation to go. But it was mentioned in that last meeting.
As far as raises go, it doesn't look like that's even that much. I mean, you have $2,000 for an infotech salary and $3,000 for a senior accountant. But if you look for professional services, the bond escrow fees, you had $560 in 2016.
Yeah, so the
$350 in 17. And you got
bond escrow fees actually was zero, and now they're $10,000 this year.
Right.
That was under advice of new legal counsel, who said that the bond escrow fees, Joe Kankar, who's here sometimes, the bond escrow fees really shouldn't be coming out of the bond funds. They should be coming out of other funds. And so we moved them. It's the same fees we've always had. It just has been moved to the general fund.
Where was it coming from before?
The bond funds.
So did you take $10,000 off of that and move it over here?
Each one is $2,000 to $3,000. We took it off of those. Those are whatever they are. They come out when you go for. These are fees for when you're paying bonds. We pay the money, but it's got to go to someplace, and they've got to figure out who the bonds go out to, who owns the bonds, and make sure that those monies are received by them. That's a service the banks provide. We go out to bid every time we go to bonds. But once we issue a bond, we have those fees for the life of the bond. Yeah, but you're right. It wasn't in finance before. It's in finance the first time this year.
So just so I'm understanding, Mike, what we're talking about here is we cut out a part-timer for fire. We cut out for the police, there's someone they want to hire, but we still have in here someone for an accountant for finance? Is that what's going on here?
Apparently we do,
Right.
because it's
So
also...
why would we not cut out the accountant if we cut out for police and fire? That's my question.
And that's actually on the committee agenda in the 7:30 meeting following this.
But that would be after we approve the portion, or the...
Right, so it just, and I hate to say it this way, kind of just slipped by in there because our last meeting, we went mostly item by item, and I missed it too.
I just remember the reduction from
Right.
one value to
So-
another.
Also,
We did go line item by line item through that general fund. We did talk about it there, and then later it mentioned it, circle back and mention it.
I don't believe we
Yeah, I
actually went
don't-
line by line. We did mostly what what you had highlighted.
Right, you're right. That one we did. It was the previous one. But it was presented both in the finance department one and when we went line by line back through.
Okay,
And
'cause-
it was in the staffing position too. We had another section on staffing positions.
Okay, so, how do we, I'm sorry, I know you want an accountant, an assistant, but I don't see how we can pull from fire and police and not pull from finance.
These are all requested positions. The finance used to have an administrative admin. We haven't had one for about a year. We had this in the budget 2 years ago, and we didn't end up hiring one for the same dollar amount. It's not an
Right.
increase from there. In addition, there used to be a separate treasurer than a finance director. We no longer have that. So we're down to the point, last year I requested, and my boss at the time, an increase in the staffing. I said that if we don't do that, we're not going to get the bonds refunded, because we won't have time to do that. And we additionally will not get some of our filings done on time. We're desperate for staff. We're in the same position. Both of those things happened. The bonds ended up being refunded in the spring, but not nearly as much as if it had happened early last fall. We would have done a lot better. Frankly, that would have been savings we could have funded in a staff accountant for many years with just those savings. I had asked for it back then, as it had been in the previous budget. We're still in that boat. We're not getting to any projects. Operations is getting more and more difficult because there's more and more essentially mandates, and we can't operate. We've got as I said when I presented the finance, in my last place, it was twice the population of Alsip. I get that, but it had all the same filings. It was Cook County. It had the debt disclosure filings. It had the audit filings. It had the budget filings. It had all of the same filings, and I had 12 full-timers and 2 part-timers. Now, it's not quite apples to apples because I had utility billing under me and I had collections under me, but the true finance core was considerably larger than it is now. I have 1.5 staff members, full-time staff members, permanent staff members. It's just not enough to get it done.
I'd like to, excuse me, and thank you. Trustee, I want to jump in here as well, too. 2 things. To go back to what you said, while you're eliminating someone, or you're not considering, let me put it that way, a part-timer for the fire department, I think both positions warrant the help. Now, keep in mind, the fire department has 8 fire inspectors right now working under the G7 rate that are doing inspections. What the chief wants to do is introduce a part-time person to do their paperwork.
Yeah, I get all that.
Which is a savings. You can't even compare that to, first off, in a finance department that actually, the previous board, we approved this position in last budget, correct? FY16, we approved that position to get done. And
But you didn't hire it, and now it
Right, this is a new
takes a
board.
look. It takes a new look.
Yeah.
Great, but it doesn't change the perspective of why it still warrants the position to be filled. As the finance director just pointed out, there's only 2.5 people working in the finance department. Okay, you have 2 full-timers, you got Mr. Alvin, you have accounts receivable, and you have a part-time accounts payable person. Now, fortunately, I've been able to assess this problem for almost 6 years as a trustee. And now as a mayor, and I am the operations manager here, while the finance department can speak for itself, I can tell you I need that component filled in order to have that office run correctly. I really believe that needs to be done. And I supported that action in fiscal year 16's budget as well, too. So it's not quite apples to apples. You know, there's 2, the chief is proposing a savings to his department, but we're talking about a support to another department. We're talking about increasing staff in another department to make that office run efficiently. If I were a carpenter and you took away my skill saw and gave me a handsaw, I can still get the job done, but I'm not going to get it done as quickly. And that's what I'm saying is, if you want to get more work done out of that office, I need the tools to get it done right, period. And I can understand, I'm one of the most conservatives on this board. I tell you, I only spend if I have to. I run right to the sticker. I was doing that earlier with some other things. And both chiefs know I am very concerned with costs all the time. But when it comes to making this component of our village run better, I don't want to actually put the taxpayers or this board at risk for short staffing a department, which is why, and thank you, Mr. Geraci walked in, It was, even with the ESDA operation with civil defense.
Two
which is why
different things, Mayor.
I stepped
Two
up
different
too.
things.
No, because all these components have to be staffed correctly, period. And as I said, I let Mr. Alvin speak for his own department. That department is a component of this village, which I'm responsible for as the operations manager. I believe it needs to be staffed better.
So what's your head count right now, Mr. Olivan?
We've got an intern. Again, an intern's not being able to get much done. Actually, the intern, later in the next meeting, helped put together the 911 packet that should be in there. But has only been focused
No, salaried staff. What's your head count?
the salaried staff in finance. I mean, I have HR.
I know,
IT,
right.
But in finance, I have under me. I have one full timer and one part timer.
So it's three of you. 2.5 times. So two and a half times.
Yeah.
Okay. So last year, minus the HR manager, what was your head count?
I had in last year's budget, I gave up partway through the summer, but I also had an administrative assistant. It was a
That
part-time
was last year?
administrative assistant. What?
That was last year?
Last year. I ended up going through 3 of them last summer, and the time I'd take to train one, then they'd go and I'd train again. I got to the point I couldn't do that because we were in the middle of an audit. And so I ended up without the administrative assistant after that because I just couldn't bear to do a 4th one before the end of the summer. So I've been without for about a year.
So what was the salary of an administrative assistant?
It's negligible compared. It was a little over $13K.
So would you consider an administrative assistant over an accountant at that
No.
price?
And no, and the reason is that person, part of it was that person couldn't do what was needed of them. They didn't have the skill set without being an accountant to do the job.
In the past year, how many filings were you late for filing?
And again, I told my previous boss months before and many more times I needed the staffing for it, but the TIF filings and the audit filings and debt disclosure. But this was all very clearly spelled out to my previous boss on a pretty much weekly basis as I asked for staffing.
Did you file extensions for either of those?
I did file extensions on some of them. They used to be filed on October 31st. They changed it rather than 3 months to 90 days, so it became October 27th rather than October 31st. I thought it was still October 31st. On some of those, I filed it 8 hours late, but I thought it was still 3 days early. So some of those extensions didn't get through on a timely basis, and when I called them up, they said, have you filed right to us?
Okay. I'm sorry, Ken. I don't know how anybody else on the board feels, but I don't support giving an accountant this year. We're a new board. We're 4 of us are new. I understand what the mayor is saying, but I don't sit comfortably with budget killing.
Budget gap.
Okay, budget gap, sorry.
I
I don't.
I mean, I can say I think the finance department needs help. However, I think we need to do it correctly. And there's the possibility not only of, I mean, I said, I've seen the job description, the things that we need to get done, but potentially they can incorporate the duties of what the fire chief is also asking for, because that is, tracking and billing of activities. I want to make sure, and again, we're not necessarily approving this position right now. We're talking about the budget for the position.
What's your allocated money for it, right, Chris?
Well, we don't have
Can't
to
hire-
approve
can't hire.
the actual spending of the money.
Right.
So I would rather take the time and make sure we get the position right and that it meets the overall needs of the village, and not necessarily, debate that right this minute. while
Well,
we're
Bill,
reviewing
as
budget.
the finance director said, 2 things. One, you can't allocate money can't appropriate money for something and not fill that position. And then as well, and this will be reflected in our audit coming up, I had a meeting last week with our auditors, and every year when you have your audit done, the auditing company will point out your deficiencies in your village during the audit. Like, you might see something in your accounting, whatever the case is. And I asked them, what do you see? Do you see any deficiencies? He says, yes, you're short-staffed. You need more staff up there. You're not getting it done with that many people. And that'll be reflected in his report when we get it then, too.
Well, I say, I'm not arguing that we don't have enough staff. I said I want to make sure we get the right staff.
So,
And we can fill the staff, as long as the line item is there for staff accountant salary, we can take the time to fill it correctly.
certainly, we'll filter and find the right personnel that we need, absolutely.
But you're appropriating it, so that says that we're approving it.
Exactly.
And I don't necessarily approve it.
No,
It's not true.
No.
Appropriation is separate from the vote on the expense. You
Right.
can
He cannot
appropriate
fill
for
the
it, but
position.
they cannot
right.
hire until this board says to fill the position.
Right.
So all we're doing at this point is leaving the line item there for the opportunity.
Then why don't we leave the fire chief's line item in then? Why didn't we leave the police chief's
line
extra
item in
CSOs?
there.
When we get time, can I address that? Because I did send out the trustees an email last weekend to talk about some of that with my position, if you will.
I'd like to just say one more thing about my position. I did put out something because I thought we were going to have this conversation actually in the committee of the whole. I put out a job description for it. I put out where I thought the conversation would go in the 2 meetings from now later tonight. Again, we lost a lot of money because we did not refinance the bonds when we had the opportunity the first time because there wasn't enough staffing. I've been working too many hours.
Well, you know what, though? Please rephrase that. We didn't lose money. We lost an opportunity to save money.
Correct. We lost an opportunity to save more money than we ended up saving. We did save money. Absolutely. Last week I worked 53 hours. The previous 2, at one point when I was refunding those bonds, there was a 2 pay period gap of covering 4 weeks where I put way over 50 additional hours. I think it was over 60 hours additional to my 40 hours a week in. The last 2 pay periods, I've been putting over 90 for a 2-week pay period.
Well,
I can't continue to do that. And then the last point I'd like to make is that we're not getting to an OPEB trust fund, and we're not getting to a pension, a retiree benefit funding policy.
Kent.
And that's going to take a lot of hours. If we get an OPEB trust fund, we're investing monies, and we're getting investment rates of return. We're not doing that now, so there's a lost opportunity cost.
I asked the finance director to draft something today. To actually, as the police chief and fire chief have done, any departments have done to support their request. And what he put in your mailboxes today, for the record, what projects that he was just referring to, we have opportunities, but yet we can't get those opportunities because you've got many other professional hours being dedicated to day-to-day projects. I mean, just right here, to actually put together a PowerPoint, you could be talking 3 hours to put something like that together and so forth.
Mayor, I put together PowerPoints every day.
So,
I mean, that's my,
continue what
that's
I'm
my
going to
job.
get at here is, for one, we can have a savings to the taxpayers if we focus more on retiree debt, as the finance director just stated. We could focus on sustainable funding and policy for retirement benefits that we're allocating almost $1.4 million a year for. We can spend more time to set up an OPEB trust, like we said, to actually dedicate more money toward those retirement funds. And then you've got audit concerns, you've got policies, you've got internal controls, cleanup of bank accounts, strategic financial planning. There's a lot of things that can be done. And again, my concern always is practical, where you put all your eggs in one basket, and what happens? We're going to put a $45 million budget on one guy's shoulders, and hope to God that doesn't break his leg, doesn't do anything that's going to knock him out of the office for a couple of months. And who takes care of all that work? Who's going to do all that work? It's practical. So when you're measuring what the strength of the village is, or who gets a secretary and who doesn't, or an assistant or anything like that, I'm with you. Let's be careful with our monies. 2 weeks ago we were $1.6 million over budget in our general fund. We took that, we scaled it down to what was more palatable. Now, and this was part of that at the same time, but now,
$8 of it out of his budget. That's it.
how much?
8,000 out of the finance department.
For that
Right.
position.
Right, for that position, right.
How much overall in the finance department? Because we asked everyone to.
Pretty much salary. Finance is pretty much out. That's what it is.
I'm going to leave
Instead,
it
these
at,
line items all went up, and it's over 22% that it's raised. We can go line by line, and I could tell you every single one and how much it's gone up. And not only that, he said his intern did this, so. Oh, you did that? Okay.
Can't say I'm proud of that.
I can say,
I mean, we're still
What I did
$660,000 in the hole.
I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket. We need the right kind of support in our finance department, and that's why I agreed to this even in fiscal year 16. This isn't a today decision for me. This decision's been made a couple of times for me, and the previous board agreed to it. And unfortunately, Mr. Alvin did the wrong thing for the right reason by not taking somebody on because his he's inundated all day long. I can tell you, I'm up in his office twice a day. He's inundated all day long. So, while he should have took on some help, as Trustee Dalzell pointed out not too long ago, that's the task now, is getting somebody in there that's got skills, that has accounting skills, and not just a student or a temp or anything like that. We need to have the right people in these offices to make the village run efficiently. And you never trade that, for just something part-time.
So, Mayor, I'm looking at
I'll recognize you, sir, in a minute.
Mayor, I'm looking at the job description that we received in the email today, and I'm sorry, but these are finance director jobs. These are not junior accountants. And I'm just going to pick one line item out of it. Filing the annual TIF reports. That's something that we've been fined on in the past year, and we're going to allocate this to a junior accountant.
Mr. Alvin will still be the supervisor in that department, and Mr. Alvin still answers to me as the operations manager here. Before I ask the public for anything, were there any other questions on the budget? Oh, I'm sorry, Chief. I apologize. You wanted to talk
Thank
about
you, Mayor.
yours.
Hopefully all of you have received my email from Saturday. I didn't find out until Friday late that the part-time secretary that I put in for was axed from the budget. And I understand, we spoke about why the ambulance got pulled out of there, but, I understand about not taking on new personnel. One of the things that we're going to ask you to pass later on today is an ordinance with our annual inspection fees. Over the last probably year and a half, I spoke many times about our Caltron fees and how we're owed money and nobody's collecting it. And that's something that started out as the finance department when Greg Palumbo was here. When he left, nobody's monitored that. And that's why we were owed so much money over a period of time. We have a vehicle now to collect what's owed to us. We passed a village ordinance, I should say, the board passed a village ordinance based on how much is owed in the Caltron fees. We're allowed to go to municipal court and collect our fees, okay, what's owed to us. We're looking at annual inspection fees. I do not have the staff, and I know finance is strapped because I've been here long enough to see this, to be able to monitor and make sure we're collecting what is owed to us. I have one secretary. I cannot put more workload onto her. One of the things that was pointed out in the budget meeting, and I apologize for not doing that, and Trustee McLaurin put out there is if I'm asking for $10,000 for a part-time secretary, why aren't I taking $10,000 out of the 7G rate? And that's in turn is what I'm proposing. Right now, my inspectors make $37.50. That's the 7G rate. All right. I'm looking for a part-time secretary that makes $14 an hour. That has the office skills. My inspectors are not office people. They go out and do inspections. They do a lot of administrative work, which to me is a waste of money. Where I can save 3 times hourly rate. So by me reducing $10,000 out of my 7G rate, it cuts 266 hours out of my inspectors, but it provides 780 hours of a part-time person to do administrative and clerical work in the inspection office, and passing a lot of this from what my inspectors do onto that person as well. So it is a cost savings because now we have somebody that's monitoring our Caltron fees, so we're not out of money. We have somebody monitoring our inspection fees that's being proposed to see if we are accurately taking in everything that we are supposed to, and help determine if we need to increase it or decrease it, whatever the case we are doing. So it's even across the board if you look at salary, but it is a cost savings because we are looking at money that we are not recouping at this time. If we look at the $160,000 that we're probably never going to recoup from Caltron fees, a tenth of that is still more than what that person's annual salary is. I'm only looking for one person up to 15 hours a week at whatever the $14 rate is for the type of secretary we're looking for. Right, so it is a cost savings, and in turn of that, I'm giving up my 7G. Now, some of the things that shows up on the 7G, if you look at your sheets, and I don't know how much you guys see for our salaries or that, last year we spent $75,000 in the 7G rate. 50,000 of it was for inspections. Out of that was 1,336 hours. All right, there's probably close to 300 hours that was done by administrative. All right, I have 15,000 in pub ed, 14,000 in training, and another $9,700 in recruit training. All right, we are recouping $10,000 this year in recruit training because we had two people that left our department to go to another department because of our Tier 2 pay scale. So when they come in, I have to train. It costs me about $5,000 to train a new person, and we're recouping those two people that we're losing with that as well. On the pub ed side, we also recoup our fees for CPR classes and fire extinguisher classes. So we brought in last year about $2,500 in our fees that we're collecting for that. So some of our 7G fees are actually being reimbursed by, depending on what the classes or what the training is. So that $75,000 really isn't accurate in the same token. Trustee Giselle, look like you're going to say something. Oh, okay. So yes, it is a cost savings, and I'm giving up 266 hours of my inspectors of administrative work they're doing to actually give it to somebody who actually knows how to do administrative work. My guys are not office people. They're street people. They go out and do the street stuff, and they come back and whatever they have to do. They're not administrators. And it's silly to pay 3 times as much to do administrative work. I mean, look at if I know Trustee Pierce has a business. I know Trustee McLaurin works for Griffith Labs. Is there anybody in their business what they do for $37.50 an hour? It's ludicrous. It doesn't make sense. So yes, we are saving money by hiring a part-time person for that position. The other thing I pointed out, it is a part-time position. It is an at-will employee. So down the road, if we can't afford that position, we eliminate it. But I have no other vehicle right now to monitor some of the things that we're trying to collect. It's just not going to happen. I don't have the people to do that, if that makes sense. Any other questions, comments? So I'd ask you at least to reconsider that, and then, like I said, lower my 7G rate with what was proposed. And if the part-time person doesn't work out, and then I guess we lose that. Right now, since we are almost, tomorrow is August 1st, by the time I even hire anybody right now, at this year I'm only looking at $5,800 for a salary. The $10,000 salary does not exist this year. We're already at August 1st. So just another consideration also. So it also gives us time to evaluate that position for the next fiscal year.
Any questions, trustees?
No.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Sanders, do you want to make a comment?
Excuse me, Kent. I'm going to ask that you put back in Chief's request for,
Say again?
if you can put back in Chief's request.
Okay. I mean, that's up to you guys. At the last
Does anybody disagree with
group
that?
in the last meeting, you guys collectively said otherwise.
Yeah.
Get a consensus on that, please?
Can we please?
Yeah, I thought we were actually going to approve that one because what they told, it seemed like others were telling me that if it didn't work out, we didn't want to fire him next year.
Well, that was the last question of the evening when we got done Wednesday night, was did we want to leave it? And the board gave a consensus no. So
Right.
if the board wants to give consensus yes,
Right. I mean,
then
it
that's what we
makes
need.
perfectly sense to get an office worker instead of paying the fireman double than what you would pay the office worker.
And keep in mind, like I said, I only have one administrator in the last 5 years. She's been out twice for extended medical problems. So again, at least it would give me a backup. Obviously, with the allotted hours, to actually fill in the event that, again, she was off for a period of time also.
But the downside is that what you're proposing is an apples and oranges situation. So if what you're saying is that your people under the 7G working to do the administrative side of it, which is going to be offset by the
Correct.
part-time, which I appreciate,
Correct.
at the dollar amount that you're asking and the hourly rate, that's 714 hours annually. 714 hours annually in your 7G rate is almost $27,000.
Correct.
So if you're only taking away 10,000 from the 7G, but you're expecting a like amount of hours off of that, then the reality is that you should be cutting the 7G rate by 27,000, not by 10,000.
We still got to do inspections. I'm just cutting the dollar amount right now
Right.
to make up the difference.
Right.
I still need to do my inspections, but I'm cutting 266 hours out of the inspectors right now.
Also, what's going to happen to those Caltron fees when the 911 goes away?
And that'll be in the next meeting that we talked about what our recommendation is going to be. If the board pursues what our recommendation is, it's a wash. They are not charging us to monitor our fees. So we're still collecting it. Now, if the board chooses to go to another direction and they go to a service or a center that charges our monitor fees, that means it takes longer to pay off the boxes. The monitoring fees are designed to pay off the boxes. The boxes run about $1,200 a piece. Right now, we charge $65 a month for monitoring fees to, within time, obviously, recoup the cost of our boxes. It just extends the amount of time to collect our fees.
Now, would the people that were monitoring our also collect?
I'm sorry?
Separate billing.
It would be separate. Okay. Never mind.
Oh, okay. All right. And that's one of the things with this part-time secretary, they'd be in constant contact with the vendor that does the Caltron to make sure we are recouping everything that's owed to the village. The companies, the business, the owners, depending on who buys it, actually signs a contract with the village to provide that service. All right. And what's happened in the past is since we didn't have the tool to collect, it's essentially a breach of a contract. Trying to go after those businesses 4 years down the road, some of the businesses no longer exist. Some of the businesses were Crestwood businesses. We lost that money. I don't want to do that again. We know that we're in financial straits, hardships, and everything else. So why do we lose $160,000? It doesn't make sense. And that's what we don't want to happen again.
We haven't been collecting these fees all along?
We haven't had the avenue to go back after the people that owed us the fees. Out of the businesses we have, the majority of them do a very good job of paying on time or paying ahead. We have some businesses that don't pay and have never paid. In 4 years, they have never paid the monitoring fee for whatever reason. And that was started, 2 finance directors ago. And once he left, got passed on to the next finance director. And I understand, I agree with Kent that his office is strapped for help. There ain't no doubt about that. And there's some other reasons why, but it's strapped for help right now. They don't have the ability to do that. Somebody has to be the ability to do that. So to me, it's easier to pay a part of the position of a $14 an hour to do that compared to somebody that's making $60,000 an hour. Again, it's going back to like what I said with my fire inspectors. Doesn't make sense.
Thank you, Chief. Can we take a consensus vote?
Sure, just a simple yes from the board if that's what they want to do. You want to put it back in? Okay.
No.
No? Okay.
This my wife telling me
Yes.
over and hang up.
Yes.
Okay. So we had 4 yeses to 1 no. So, and gentlemen, you would be a yes on that side? Okay, so we had 4 yeses to 1 no and a consensus, so it would be a yes. On a consensus.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Sure. Mr. Sanders, did you want to address the board?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Board, for the opportunity. The reason I'm up here right now is on behalf of Ashby Council 31, Local 3053, which is not just Public Works, it's Water Department Clerical, Building Department Clerical, Clerk's Office, and Police Clerical, and our part-time employees throughout the village. One of the concerns I had when I found out earlier today that the village was considering thinking of adding another accountant is, first thing that came to mind is we currently have somebody who just retired, and we have somebody from one of our departments who's going to help out in that retiree's position and basically do 2 jobs at one time, because they were told that there's no money there for her to become the secretary that sooner or later she should become. So she's going to do her current position and also be a secretary in what we consider moving up in assisting one of the departments. And there's no money to pay her to become a full-time secretary and fill the position that she will sooner or later vacate in the police department, but yet we are going to hire another accountant. The second thing I'd like to say about that is sooner or later that department, between interns, part-time employees, more accountants, is going to start exceeding some of the departments that we have in our union. If you walk around and look at the different clerical departments, our water department, count how many people are actually working. Does anybody know how many people are full-time in the water department that take care of all the water in the village, drinking water, everything else? Does anybody know? It's under 5. The Public Works Department, which is responsible for storms, when trees come down, sewers, backups, snow plowing. We don't have that many either. I believe if I count correctly, we're 10. And then we're going to keep adding people to the finance department at pretty decent salaries. Salaries which the finance department last contract negotiation made us go to a different tier pay system, just like the fire chief was just talking about. And it's pretty hard to fill the role in the Public Works Department. We've had job opening, I believe, for a while now. I don't know how many applicants we got, but I don't see anybody getting hired for it. I consider it a skilled position. I've been doing it for over 12 years now. I've seen a lot of things come and go through the village, and a lot of finance directors come and go through the village. And lately we've been having some different issues, which is why I'm up here talking about this, because as a union as a whole, this isn't just me, this isn't one department, this is AFSCME as a whole does not agree with this. Recently we had paychecks. There was an issue with them. Unbeknownst to the employees, a few days later after they went and cashed their paper checks at their banks, the checks were pulled back and removed from their bank accounts.
And the reason being, though, too,
Well,
just to clarify, yeah.
I understand that, but it took 5 weeks for people, over 5 weeks, to get reimbursed their bank fees that their bank hit them. That's how long it took for reimbursements. It's taking just as long to be reimbursed for certain things that we have in our contract regarding boots, protective equipment that we buy.
Why is that?
I don't know.
But for the record, too, the reason that those checks did is, with me being a new mayor, my signature is on all those checks. And when I submit my signature to ADP or whatever service that we use, and excuse me, is it ADP? Paylocity. Thank you. I don't want to throw somebody under the bus. Anyway, my signature didn't come up. They put it on the checks. You could barely see it. So the checks wouldn't recognize, the banks wouldn't recognize the check. So it was something on the check company that did that. They didn't do it correctly. And what we did, we went back with like a heavier ink pen, and that's all been corrected. And the village did, if there was any NSF, the village did certainly pay and give everybody back their monies on the NSFs and stuff then too. But that was on the paycheck company, certainly not on the village.
It was just, I was on vacation when it actually happened, and I have direct deposit, but it was a little shocking to when we realized
I sat here on
multiple
Friday
days
and
later,
fixed it for
the funds
everybody.
that people put in their bank accounts were removed, and there wasn't any phone calls or mass letters or anything to let any of the employees know. Some people have bills they paid, and the bills didn't get paid, and then their banks charged them, and then it took 3 pay periods, just shy of 3 pay periods, which was about 5 weeks, because it happened a week into the first pay period, to get reimbursed for it. That's just some of the things I'm talking about with where the union is coming from, where we do not agree adding another accountant when there are so many other short-staffed positions throughout this village that are critical to day-to-day operations of the village. And I understand finance is one of the most, or if not the most critical
Absolutely.
to the village. I'm a numbers guy. I have mathematics degrees. I understand that.
And if you see the trend, like you said, Mr. Sanders, here we've been going through a handful of part-timers, and it hasn't worked out. They all find employment elsewhere and everything else. And what we're trying to do for the first time in this village, and for as long as I know of, is to bring in a full-time person to man that position and to staff that office correctly with a halfway decent salary and stuff. And actually, trustees, if it means anything too, I mean, we do have a minimal, like, because it is an exam, it could take more hours than a typical 40-hour job to do stuff like that yet too. But, it can be adjusted as well too. We do have a minimum, so we're at 50 right now, it could be 47.5. That is considered a municipal exempt salary, and that's per HR total, and that's where I got that number from. So, I mean, but your point's well taken, Mike, that, while a lot of the departments are struggling, you got two chiefs that are asking for a couple of positions in theirs. I actually met with the police chief this morning regarding the retired position, because I'm totally on top of this thing. And while there is a transitional period to fill that position, he wants that filled no more than anybody else. But unfortunately, the retiree is chief. She's basically that employee is still on the books until December, right? That's so that the money's still going out. I mean, it's not like that money stopped. They had time coming that we're still covering. So here we'd be paying it again on top of that, which is why, and it's not it would be a department decision on how to fill that and when, between the police and HR. But simply put, I think we're just being careful with funding on this thing, that we're not overfunding that one role, just even on a temporary basis. I get it. I'm sure we all do, that we want to fill that position as soon as possible and stuff. But unfortunately, that particular employee is already, and fire gets stuck on this all the time too. You get a guy who retires 6 months before he technically leaves, and we're still covering that tab because of time due. So.
Correct, and I understand the time due. It's just I know what a certified CPA or accountant makes or should make, and when you see the fact that we can't staff a secretary or have the meeting that I had with HR about the person going to do two jobs at once, not to get into too much detail with personnel names or anything. It's hard to understand that. I understand somebody's on the books, but people have to know that this kind of stuff is going to come sooner or later, and we're going to hire another accountant to a department that runs well, could run better, yes, but we still have so many other voids in other areas. And when I spoke to the people at the union, unfortunately, I end up being the spokesperson to most of this.
Oh, no, and I appreciate that, Mike. Yeah.
But this was just the union consensus, and I appreciate the time of you, Mayor. And
oh, sure. And just real quick, the other side of the sword, and I get it. Both sides hurt. And the other side would be is every year, like as you just said, and we asked all departments too, like, and gentlemen in your departments as well, if you have a pending retirement, as much as we want to budget for those, and we certainly try, because we've got a couple of positions in here as well. That's the thing is, do we budget 6 months worth of salary for that one position to cover that? And it's tough. And we were, like I said, a couple weeks ago, this board has a hard task in front of it. We were 1.6 over, and we reduced it significantly, but we're still a little bit over budget and stuff then too. So that's where we run into a problem.
Yeah, I understand all monies have to come from somewhere, and that's one of the reasons why that as tight as money is with the village, everybody has been working a little harder with less.
Right. And I appreciate the
union standpoint is that everybody should try to do that as hard as they can.
Point taken, Mike. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders, please sign in. Thank you.
Before we close out this part of the meeting, trustees, any other questions? Anything else that you want to talk about?
Anybody else from the public?
I was just going to finish with. Anybody else up here first?
I just remember at last year's budget, some of the meetings that we attended, it was actually you that was sitting in this seat saying that you guys were here till 11 o'clock one night, going line by line through the budget, which me and this crew also have done the same on a couple occasions in the past few weeks. And our budget this year is actually in worse shape than it was last year in your administration for this. And you said, and I quote, "We can't cut anything else unless we cut head count." And now you're asking us to add 2 people to the head count.
Well,
worse budget. I just can't.
The other thing, we eliminated most of the capital items from the list. So we're not really doing too many capital projects this year, that's for sure. of a $45 million budget, you know, we keep identifying with a $50,000 spot. And, you know, even with whatever the deficit is, that's the only thing in question right now is a 50. In other words, it's targeted at one department. And the police chief had a great plan too, but that's contingent on the
Premises
contingent on like a 911 dispatch center and so forth yet too, to fill a role there, because we could be on the hook for monitoring and whatnot then too. So we haven't necessarily crossed that bridge yet at the same time. Everyone's got needs. And actually, this is the first time, which I always felt, and that's the point I made in this year's budget with civil defense. Here, we were funding an employee to represent civil defense, but yet had zero equipment. You know, this was all under the previous administration, but didn't have enough tools to be effective. And that's why this year we funded that a little bit better, because I want it to be an effective department, and I want to qualify for any federal funding if and when we need those kind of things, because they may not take us serious through FEMA and whatnot then too. So, I mean, we've all got obligations that we need to meet here. But Trustee Zelinski, your point's well taken. I get exactly what you're saying.
But it wasn't just the 50,000. It's closer to 125, 130,000 throughout the budget.
And I'm not going to patronize myself, but previous mayor didn't participate in meetings like I have, and I wanted to take the lead to help this board try and make some great decisions if we could. And if we stopped, and that's where the finance director pointed earlier, we stopped when it got to labor, because, you know, obviously we were going to talk about operational costs then, and we didn't want to have any layoffs, and that's exactly where we stopped. Many companies, I can tell you, a lot of the residents will tell you that right in a heartbeat, and they've retired from this, that, and the other thing. They'll tell you right out, hey, when you got to we got to do what you got to do. Well, we stopped from making that decision to reduce our workforce. And we're trying to make this work, and we have not, while we have passed a couple of deficit budgets over the last few years, we have never overspent. And again, Trustee, to stand corrected too, I spoke to you recently, we have amended our budgets after we've passed them, but we typically only will do that like at the end of the year. If some line items weren't used enough of, like we might appropriate some money for some, and it wasn't, other line items might need some help, and that's where we do it. You really can't take budgets, even appropriation budgets, and move those around periodically throughout the year, because your ratings agencies will take offense to that then too. It looks like you don't know what you're doing with your budget. Commit to a budget somewhat, and know what you're identifying with, you know, because that's the main goal at the end of the day. But we can amend those budgets, and we do them almost every year, based on the need of those departments. And sometimes, let's just say, consulting fees. Like right now, we're anticipating a lot of construction coming up. There's a couple of big projects that I mentioned last week. We may need more help with consulting. If we get lucky and we don't need all that, great. We have a few dollars that we can appropriate to something else within that same department and so forth then too. So we're always very careful about that, and I think we have the right guy helping us do that.
Trustees, also towards the end of the year, like the mayor was saying, is we actually had to move money from one line to the 7G to cover some of our 7G because of the annual inspections and administrative costs that we were forking out for that as well. So, you know, so we'll be eliminating that, and then obviously I'm going to look at our 7G rate a little bit better to kind of divvy it up so we're not in that same predicament we are at the end of this fiscal year also. You know, you guys had to make a lot of hard decisions, and I applaud you for that. It's just tough times, and we'll make through it, but the biggest thing is we don't lose any staffing over it, and that's the key thing.
One thing, just Mr. Mayor, I just want to point out, I mean, since the majority of our expenses are salaries, I just want to make sure we're hiring the right people in the right places.
I agree.
I mean, nothing against the position that the fire chief is asking for, but really does our fire department staff belong being a collection agency? I mean, that's the only issue I have is, I mean, to be bringing in a part-time person to do billing activities, that's not a fire department function. So that's what, I want the right people in the right jobs.
And in other municipalities that are large by us, their administrative people in the fire prevention, that is part of their tasks also because of, you know, what goes on with the finance. And We're not collecting fees, we're just monitoring it and just passing on to the finance director as well as the trustees also.
But that's what accountants do professionally.
And-
I mean,
Yes.
we monitor the money.
Absolutely.
So-
Absolutely.
Trustee McLaughlin, per ordinance too, if I remember this correctly, as well as all hires through departments like that, while it would be the chief's recommendation, you fortunately are the chairperson for the fire committee. It would still be with your advice and consent if we approve that
Correct.
hire. Okay? So you've got that advantage to look that over to make sure you're getting the right personnel to handle that too.
And that's something we'd work with the HR manager when we're getting close to that time.
Mayor, I just want to say that I'm not targeting any specific department. Every single headcount addition that was discussed,
Sure.
I went after every one of them. I challenged every one of them. This was just one that, in my opinion, didn't get challenged. I'm going to vote yes on this ordinance because I'm not going to hold up the ordinance, but I will say that every headcount addition that comes up for vote here in the coming months, I want to see from the finance department and from human resources, like Trustee McLaughlin said, appropriate job descriptions, duties, and, as we've suggested before, salary surveys as well.
No, trustee, point taken, and this is just good professional dialogue. That's all it is. It's never professional or personal with me at all. And again, when somebody needs something, the chief made a case, both chiefs have, all the departments heads have, and really, you didn't hear a lot from me other than coordinating meetings here and so forth, but I really feel that's an essential tool that I need to make this village run well. That was really my point. Any questions from the public before we close out this part of the meeting? Thank you very much. Then I'd like to get a motion to
Motion to
close.
adjourn the special meeting?
Right.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 7:46 PM.
Here's 7 o'clock. Agenda, please. Okay. Trustees, we'll move forward then to our next item of business. This will be recognized as the Village of Alsip Special Village Board Meeting. Today is Monday, July 31st, and I'll call this meeting to order at 7:47 p.m. And can we have a roll call, please?
Sure. Trustee McGreal is absent. Trustee Dalzell.
Present.
Trustee Pierce.
Here.
Trustee Zelinski.
Here.
Trustee Juarez.
Here.
Trustee McLaughlin.
Here.
Mayor Ryan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Can you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Officers' report, starting with myself. Basically, we had a good conversation during the update on our fiscal year budget that we're going to be asked to approve here shortly. And all parties, I don't mean to say parties, all committees made a great presentation over the course of these budgets at the same time. So I really appreciate all department heads doing as I asked. In some cases, we've met at village department head meetings, which we have the last Wednesday of every month. And I appreciate the department heads complying and reducing their salaries as I asked them to, as much as they did. And this board was tasked with doing more of the same in order to make it palatable and budgetable, obviously, then, too. There's going to be a few items coming up that we're going to put a vote to as far as the action items on our agenda this evening. And again, I just want to thank everybody for doing a good job as best we could with what we had to work with on this yet, too. I'm all about living within our means, and I'm going to work hard, as we all will, to make that happen. So I'll go to the clerk. You have a report as well?
No report, Mayor.
Okay. Attorney report?
No report, sir.
Thank you. We have Michael Kankar with us this evening. Public forum. Anyone from the public like to address this board? No one this evening? Thank you. Then we'll go to the standing committees. Finance, Trustee McLaughlin.
This time I would like to make a motion to approve the FY18 annual appropriation ordinance.
Second.
As amended, that's as amended with her.
Thank you.
As amended.
And as
As
it,
amended with your,
Okay.
to include the position. Because the one in front of you
the
doesn't
one
have the
doesn't-
position in there,
okay.
so that should be, I'm just pointing that out.
And Mr. Alvin, you've got that done? Okay. So we'll take the roll on that.
Okay, roll call number 1 to approve the fiscal year 18, which is May 1st, 2017 to April 30th, 2018, annual appropriations ordinance as amended. Trustee McGreal is absent. Trustee Dalzell.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Zelinski.
Yes.
Trustee Juarez.
Yes.
Trustee McLaughlin.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item of business will be the Fire Committee. Trustee McLaurin.
This time I have a motion to approve an ordinance amending Chapter 9, Fire Prevention and Protection, Article 3, Fire Prevention, by changing Section 9-48, Inspection Fee Schedule, and amending Chapter 6, Buildings and Building Regulations, Article 5, Permit, Inspection, Occupancy, and Engineering Fees, by deleting Section 6-108, Annual Inspection Fees of the Municipal Code of the Village of Alsip.
Can I get a second, please?
I'll second.
Trustee Pierce was second.
Roll call number 2 to approve the ordinance amending Chapter 9, Fire Prevention and Protection, Article 3, Fire Prevention, by changing Section 9-48, Inspection Fee Schedule, and amending Chapter 6, Buildings and Building Regulations, Article 5, Permit Inspections, Occupancy, and Engineering Fees, by deleting Section 6-108, Annual Inspection Fees of the Municipal Code of the Village of Alsip. Trustee McGreal is absent. Trustee Dalzell.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Zelinski.
Yes.
Trustee Juarez.
Yes.
Trustee McLaughlin.
Yes.
Motion carries. This will now be known as ordinance number 2017-7-11. And for the record, I would like to make a note that the annual appropriations ordinance is now known as ordinance number 2017-7-10.
Thank you, trustees.
Moving forward.
Yes.
Next on the agenda would be the Police Committee. Trustee McGreal is absent. Trustee Dalzell.
Mayor, I'd make a motion to approve an ordinance amending Chapter 12, Licenses, Permits, and Business Regulations by adding Article 14, Booting of Motor Vehicles, to the Municipal Code of the Village of Alsip.
Second.
Roll call number 3 to approve an ordinance amending Chapter 12, License, Permits, and Business Regulations by adding Article 14, Booting of Motor Vehicles, to the Municipal Code of the Village of Alsip. Trustee McGreal is absent. Trustee Dalzell.
Yes.
Trustee Pierce.
Yes.
Trustee Zelinski.
Yes.
Trustee Juarez.
Yes.
Trustee McLaughlin.
Yes.
Motion carries at 7:52 p.m. on July 31st. The ordinance will now be known as ordinance number 2017-7-12.
I'd like to just make a comment on that ordinance as well, too. I want to thank Police Chief Miller, as well as the village attorneys and the Police Committee for getting this done right away. We've had a real issue with, obviously, businesses finding a loophole in many of the laws that allowed for booting of cars. Our ordinances only deal with towing all the time, but not booting, by immobilizing vehicles. And we will have this ordinance posted out in the hallway here at the Village Hall for review. This should be out there by tomorrow, and because this goes into effect immediately starting tomorrow then, too. And I feel terrible that we weren't able to help our constituents quicker. But again, we've got 19-year policemen on the job, 20-year policemen who've never even seen something like this come through before, and we did our best to counter it right away. So thank you, Chief, for getting that done. Immediately, yeah, so tomorrow. And then you still have the agenda there. Thank you. Any presentations, petitions, or communications? Any unfinished business?
Motion to adjourn?
Any new business first?
No, okay. We're done.
All right. Then can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. Trustees, can we just have just a 2-minute recess, and we'll have our committee meeting, and we'll wrap it up for the evening then, too. I just need to speak with the clerk and the attorney here. Thank you. We're at 8:07 p.m., and can we take the roll, please?
Sure. Roll call for attendance. Trustee McGreal is absent. Trustee Delzell.
Here.
Trustee Pierce.
Here.
Trustee Zelinski.
Here.
Trustee Juarez.
Here.
Trustee McLaughlin.
Here.
Mayor Ryan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a matter of protocol, we do have to do a Pledge of Allegiance, so I'm sorry, let's do this one more time. Thank you. With all the back-to-back meetings, obviously, we want to recognize protocol as we should. Officer reports, starting with myself. Trustees, just as a reminder, I hope everybody had invoices to approve this evening. Payroll and accounts payable was told me the other day that occasionally they're getting a few are late, and we certainly don't want to hold up our vendors and cause any strife on their end. Also, on the agenda this evening, I had a discussion of the consolidation of the boat launch committee into the Public Work Committee. Again, Public Work is, over the last year or so, how long has it been, Mike? 1 year or 2 years? Has Public Works been overseeing the boat launch? Okay. And I felt, just in the interest of not having much of a report, to have Public Works report on the boat launch. So I'll put this on. First off, it's up for a discussion. Would anyone like to discuss this matter? No? Then, trustees, thanks. And what I'll do then is I'll ask that we put this on the agenda at our next board meeting for approval to consolidate the boat launch committee into the Public Work Committee.
So we're going to amend the ordinance on that, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll ask the village attorney to take care of that. Thank you. Next. Tomorrow night, folks, we do have our Alsip Police Department National Night Out.
You're fine.
Okay, just want to make sure I wasn't stepping on the police committee's toes here. It's not on our agenda. So, first off, just as an agenda for tomorrow night, this actually goes from 5:30 till 8 o'clock p.m. From 3 to 5:30, we're going to be closing the street to set up. From 5:30 till 8, we're going to feature the 7th Annual Police Classic Car Show, as well as the Touch a Truck event. The Alsip Police Department will be providing giveaways, activities, and community service information. Local organizations will be providing safety tips, giveaways, personal safety concepts, and family safety and health tips. From 6 till 8 p.m., there's going to be a game truck available from Chicago Gaming, and you can actually challenge a cop. So it's going to be a game with a cop. So be doing that. Also from 6 to 8 p.m., there's going to be children's games, music, snacks, and train rides. Activities include police station tours, Kid Tracks it's a Kid Tracks Dodge Charger police car and Kid Motorized Police motorcycle riding toy activities. There's going to be a caricature artist, face painter. From 6:30 to 7, the bagpipes and drums from the Emerald Society will be playing for us. I like them. Then from 7 till 8 p.m., there's going to be a magic show featuring Steve Chazaday. From 8:15 till 10:15, the party actually shifts to the pool, the Alsip Village Pool at 11930 South Costner. And there's going to be a movie, and it's called a pool party and movie at Sprayfari Aquatic Park. So again, our program coordinator is Rocco Merlo, and he always does a great job at something like this. So looking forward to seeing everybody out tomorrow night at 5:30 for National Night Out. Chief, anything you want to add to that at all, too? No? Covered it?
I think you did a fine job, Mayor.
Okay. Also, for the record...
Hear a little more from the chief on that?
No, I don't want to steal his thunder. And then, let's see, and then the next one, got a great email from from our village attorneys. We've actually find the copies of the summons and the complaint we filed. They filed this last Wednesday on behalf with the sheriff's department and whatnot for the house that we're trying to possibly tear down at 3725 West 120th Place. Roger, we've been all over this. The house is uninhabitable, and it's really kind of pretty much unsafe. Public Works did a nice job helping us secure that recently, but we're getting that is in court now. So we are making some ground on that and stuff then too. So, and Mike, I had asked your department if you would please, just in the interest, and we'll keep a bill tally going for whoever's responsible for that property, because obviously the property owner is not taking, because there is a family that's ultimately responsible for this. But I'd like to keep the grass cut at that location and so forth, in the interest of keeping that neighborhood safe from rodents and so forth then too, because that's another adventure.
What was that address again, Mayor?
It should be 3725 120th Place, right?
Correct.
120th,
Okay. And Mike, again, for the record, thank you. We had an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, through we had a department head meeting last Wednesday, and we do have a gentleman. We're not sure of the status of his health right now. He may have passed, but there's a house that's really unkept at 118th Place and Tripp, and we had an opportunity. We had some folks that had to do community service through the county and through Mr. Frater's office at Public Works, and I asked that they go out and they cut the grass and made it more presentable, and the neighborhood was very appreciative. And we have a couple more community service folks coming back. I want them to snip the trees out from the fence and whatnot. And not that we're going to spend a lot of time on something like this, but that neighborhood deserves that attention. And unfortunately, there's nobody there to keep that up as well. So let's do what we can to help the neighborhood on that then, too. That's all I had to report. Clerk?
I have a presentation of the FOIA report, for May 2017. There were a total of 29 requests. A presentation of the FOIA report for June 2017, and there were 28 requests. Presentation of the IDOT motor fuel tax allotment for May 2017 in the amount of $42,793.17. And finally, the presentation of the IDOT motor fuel tax allotment for June 2017 in the amount of $33,983.15. That is all, Mayor.
Thank you. We don't recognize the attorney at a committee meeting or an engineer, so that was just included. Public forum. Would anyone like to bring anything to the board's attention or speak to anything? No one. Thank you. Standing committees. Finance, Trustee McGlohan.
At this time, I'm going to actually pull the request for the additional staff accountant, as mentioned on the agenda, and we'll discuss that at next month's committee meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Otherwise, I will have a list of payrolls and a list of bills for approval.
Okay. Next, Fire Committee, Trustee McGlohan.
We have an update of the special 911 meeting held on July 27th. Would you like to brief us, Chief?
Yes. Last week we had hopefully to be our final meeting to discuss what we're doing with our dispatch center. As all of you should know, this has been about a 2-year project. State law changed several years ago that pretty much says if you don't have 25,000 people, you need to consolidate and go somewhere else. When this process first began, Chief Miller was Deputy Chief Miller at the time, and him and I had a conversation about trying to keep it in-house for a couple different reasons. A, we didn't want to lose any of our people. We felt we had a better service working with our people that are actually in town. And plus the radio room was redone at the time. For whatever reason, it took so long to get us where we're at right now, and with the state law change, we ran out of people who we could try to consolidate with and make a larger dispatch center to hit that 25,000 people. So we've had a couple special meetings over the last couple of weeks. At one time, we did tour 6 different facilities, I believe. We made it down to 3 finalists, Southwest Central, Oak Lawn Central, and Orland Fire, which only did fire only. So over the last two meetings, we kind of narrowed it down to the two, Southwest Central and Oak Lawn. Last Friday we met, right? Yeah, last Friday we met, and we heard them one more time, and we took a vote, and our recommendation from 4-1 is to go with Oak Lawn Central, based on their financials, based on them willing to take on a good amount of our current employees, based on they're willing to do the Caltron monitoring at no cost compared to the other agencies. So that's what we're recommending at this time. So I believe at this time we turn it over to the board and whatever you guys want to do with it at this point.
Just a clarification too, Chief. That was actually Thursday, the 27th.
Oh, Thursday. I'm sorry, Thursday. All my days have been juggled
No
over the
problem.
last week, so I apologize for that. Any questions?
Any questions from the board on that? Now, again, the reason we're bringing it up at committee is we're obviously going to give enough information to the board to, we're going to have a committee meeting on this with
Correct.
the board. And this was just the 911 committee's recommendation.
Correct.
The board ultimately will make the approval on what they wish to do, but this was just the 911 committee's recommendation, so we've got down that
Right.
far.
Keep in mind, we have to have a plan filed by December 31st of this year on what we are doing, so gives us 4 months.
So then assuming we say, okay, yeah, we totally agree, what are your next steps?
Then we need to begin negotiations with Oak Lawn Central if that's where we are going to go with.
You guys would have to enter into a contract. There's also some ordinance changes that are involved in some agreements that are needed to be signed between us and them, intergovernmental agreements. The whole process, by the time it gets filed with the state approves it, and they start transferring 911 lines. We're looking at about a year. So by the time it's all said and done.
So obviously, there's some logistics that we still need to look at also, and then also on the police department side with the lockup issue. So there'll be further, conversations down the road, but again, that's our recommendation right now.
Very good. Next on the agenda, Police Committee, Trustee McGrill, be Trustee Dozell.
As the mayor stepped on the national night out, I won't be able to say or speak to that issue. I don't think I could get any more clear or concise than the police chief has done. So, the presentation of a request to hire one part-time CSO, which bring the department up to 4 of the allocated 5 approved in the department budget. The presentation of a request to fill the vacancy left open after the retirement of Chief Rads to bring the department to its total capacity. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Public Works, Trustee Juarez.
I have a list of bills and a list of timesheets. That's it.
Okay. Building Department, Trustee Zelinski.
Yes, Mayor, I got a presentation of a request for permission to host a benefit for the Samantha Climb Committee at Sprinkler Fitters Local 218 Union on November 19th, 2017, and a presentation of a request for the Shepherd Athletic Booster Club to post temporary ground signs for 2 craft shows on December 2nd, 2017 and April 8th, 2018. The signs will be placed a week before each show and removed the day after the show.
They're
That's all.
awfully early on that request, aren't they?
You're on that committee, aren't you?
I am.
All right. Water and Sewer, Trustee Dozell.
Presentation of list of bills and the employee time records. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. And the License Committee, Trustee Juarez.
I have a list of companies for licenses, and I was asked to read these. Here you go. Roto-Rooter Plumbers, Mike's Fine Furniture, Restore Construction Company, Matthews SDS Amusement, Ltd., Juba Shops, Kildare Concrete One, J&F Chiletto Construction, L&M General Construction, Dyros Inc., Will Gallatin DBA GATT, Roto-Rooter Plumbers, Pan American Concrete, Liquid Concessions, Procom Enterprises Ltd., Master Exterior LLC, Davis Roofing and Construction, Carey Roofing and Masonry, Seal Tight Exteriors, Risha Printing and Signs, Bond Transit, Chicagoland Diesel, and Automotive Service Truck Mechanical Repair, J&M Construction Pros, Presidential Builders and Remodel Contractors, Seal Right Asphalt, A&E Roofing and Siding, DGB Roofing Construction, Lakewood Paving Company, Alpine Demolition Services, Accurate Glass, Peter Hinkling, S&L Caterage, Bearing Landscaping, Master of Aluminum, DBA New Home, Bennett and Brasu Roofing, Randy's Remodeling, Richard Sobrew, Kirk Precision Tool, Ileana Concrete, KC Treasurers, and that's it, Mayor.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Economic Development, Trustee Pierce.
If people have, I don't know if people noticed, but there's been trucks at Checkers. The deal is finally closed, and they've obtained all their permits. The paving of 116-18 to 116-18 to 38 Pulaski RD Land Ventures is completed, and next week we'll have the signed RDA for Chernovsky's strip mall.
Very good, thanks. I saw that parking lot today, it looked great.
Yeah, they're moving.
Real nice. Planning and Zoning, Trustee Zelinski.
Yes, Mayor, we have a presentation of case number 2017-7-Z-100 for the rezoning of the property at 4735 West 122nd Street from R1 to B1 special use for a business office. Planning and Zoning Committee approved the request on July 12, 2017 by a vote of 5-1. That is all.
That's going to be an interesting one to kind of take a look at, too. I found that concept a little bit different over there. I think it's worth, I think we should really kind of take a look at that when that comes through. Yeah, I know we're getting their recommendation, but that, I've actually had a couple of those residents come into my office from around there. They're not so sure about that as well, where he wants to take out the sales office that's on the property and actually conduct the sales into the house that's behind the property in a way, too. So I think that's worthy of, well, they've made that recommendation, trustees, I want you to take a look at that and so forth then, too. So.
Yeah, I mean, one question I would have in relation to that, is there anything in this for actually customer parking? Because that area is not fun to drive past when they actually have people visiting the car lot because they parked on 122nd Street and you're coming off 120 on Cicero onto 122nd.
Great point. And I'll ask the chairman, Chairman Graycheck, to be at the next meeting and see if he's got any demographics for us on that then too.
I mean, because I know originally when this business got their license at that location, it had a limited lifespan on it, and we have greatly exceeded that limited lifespan. And I don't know if steps were ever taken in the interim, to address that.
That's fine. And most zoning things are obviously somewhat cut and dry, but I think this is worthy only because I've gotten a couple of visits from neighbors. That's the only reason I'm bringing it to everybody's attention. I want to look at this a little more careful, that's all.
Well, I said this one, I believe currently they're exceeding the number of vehicles on the lot that they were allotted.
Okay.
I could be mistaken, but I believe they do have too many vehicles on the lot.
Okay.
For what their original licensing was.
Very good. Next, Village Properties, Trustee McLaughlin.
All right, I have a request to go out to bid to seal coat the Heritage 1 and Heritage 2 parking lots. Anything I need to know special about that? Okay. And then I also have a request to go out to bid to replace the common area carpet at Heritage 1 and Heritage 2, which is included in the budget.
Okay. Insurance Committee, Trustee McGrail's absent. Next. Anyone?
It's you or me.
I have no report, Mayor.
Trustee Pierce or McLaughlin? Okay, no report. Ordinance and legislation, Trustee Pierce.
No report, Mayor.
IT, Trustee Dalzell.
No report, Mayor.
Boat launch, Trustee Juarez.
No report.
Human Resources, Trustee McGrail. Committee.
No report.
No report.
Is Pearson Warren.
No report, okay.
Report.
Health and Pollution, Trustee Pierce.
No report, Mayor.
Traffic Safety, Trustee Dalzell.
No report, Mayor.
Any presentations, communications, or petitions? I had one today, folks. I'm really sad to report that Demon Dogs is closed. And I met with, we were at a barbecue. The fire department helped out a couple of weeks ago. We were actually at they were filming a program for Big Bad Barbecue Brawl or something like that, and it was a New Jersey company, and we had I had a nice conversation with Russ Finley, the owner, and I want to discuss his reasons. It was more like a health issues is what he cited with me, and a wonderful man, very spiritual guy and stuff yet then too. I mean, very church going and so forth, and super nice guy. And I went by there today just to see, and there was a locksmith company out there changing door locks on the place and so forth. And I'll tell you, I actually took a picture of his sign as I was over there, and he changed his message board out there to read, he says, we loved you, we fed you, and we will miss you, is what he's got on his message board out there. So he's a staple in this community, great establishment. I have seen it on some of the, it was like an online trade publication of some type, but it is for sale, and hopefully we get somebody in there right away. I was actually, over the weekend, I was out with some relatives of mine that have some very successful food businesses, and I was trying to get those guys to take a peek at it and stuff yet, too. They've got a place in South Chicago and Orland Park as well. They've got a couple locations, and they won't tell me who the purveyor is, but they got chickens that you think were on steroids and stuff. So I was trying to get those guys to come in there, and nothing yet. But so certainly, folks, should you know anybody, please point them in that direction, because I really want to see that place up and working again. But unfortunately, Demon Dogs is closed as of today. So, any unfinished business?
I just have one comment I'd like to make, and I don't know if I need to thank Roger or Jay or who it is, but whoever addressed the issue over at Condesa, the back parking lot looks so much better.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you. The weeds were horrible, and driving by the other day, they have taken care of that. So everybody who participated, thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, and I actually met with Jazz Trucking today, and I'll speak with you and Linda tomorrow, and I came to some resolve with him as well. And we're going to clean up that whole fence a little bit better. And unfortunately, the way this board did agree to the berm that he's got, but you really can't cut that grass. That is a natural wildlife kind of thing. I was up and close and personal on that thing today. You can't cut that grass. So I know, but it's tomato. It's how you look at those and stuff, But we're going to clean up the fence. We're going to make it look much better. But I met with them for about an hour this morning.
When they made that presentation, though, that was their plan.
Was the berm?
The berm.
Yeah.
And when you make a plan, you better have a plan to sit there and maintain it.
Oh, I know. And unfortunately, I'm not a horticulturist, but I found out, those are shade trees and this and that and the other. I'm like, well, it looks like something that didn't belong, that kind of thing, So maybe I'll get Mike's tree guy out there to confirm if that's really a shade tree or not then, too, One of them grew on the wrong side of the fence. That guy's going for sure, that kind of thing. So, any new business? Anybody? Then can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks for joining us this evening, folks.